I want us to think this morning a little bit about the reality that being loved by God and being in the presence of God is so extraordinary that it is worth people giving and sacrificing their whole lives for. And I think sometimes we can go to church and we can get in religious routines and we can forget that the essence of this whole thing is actually experiencing God. One of the most interesting and thought-provoking books that I've ever read is it's called The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. How many of you have ever read that? Oh, man. It is different. And it is written as instructions, and this is creepy, but it is written as instructions from one demon to another demon on how to, like his little demon protege, on how to mess with people. And the junior demon has been assigned by the boss, and they keep referring him to as the boss, so like Satan, to follow around and tempt this one particular man. And the man is constantly referred to in the letters that go back and forth between these two demons as the patient. Is that creepy? I mean, it's just like chilling. And the only real objective of this junior demon is to keep the patient away from God. So like the ultimate aim in this whole thing is not to make the man sad. It's not to make him evil. It isn't to make him depressed or turn him into this horrendously wretched sinner, although from the perspective of the demons, that would be awesome. But the main objective is simply separation from God. Whatever it takes to keep this man from God. And it's interesting because God is referred to in the letters that go back and forth as the enemy, which would make sense, of course, from the perspective of a demon, but still, as you're reading it, it's just weird, and it takes some getting used to. Now, to show you what I'm talking about, I want to read you a little snippet, and this is the counsel of the senior demon to the junior demon, and it's a reminder that getting the man, the patient, to commit big sins is not really the point. Okay, so here's what the senior demon writes to the junior demon, his little protege. You will say that these are very small sins, doubtless. Like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Now, if you know me and you've been around me very much over the years, you know, like, I'm not really a big Satan guy. Like the Bible says that demons are real and they're active in our world. But I just don't tend to give them a lot of thought. I don't tend to talk about them a lot. And I know in some Christian communities, like for some Christians, like every single problem that comes along in life is a demon, right? It's just like every bad thought or every problem that gets in the way of life, like it must be a demon. You know, like the car breaks down, it's the demons, you know? It just could be your starter, but... It's just everything is Satan, everything's a demon. And so those of you that know me, you know, I'm the opposite of that. But I want us to start today by kind of pondering a fairly serious question. If the evil one was whispering to you, and he will, and he does, what kinds of things do you suppose he might say? And I wonder if it would maybe be stuff like, hey, don't aim at living each moment of every day in a transformational relationship with a risen Jesus. I think he would say stuff like, don't look to Jesus during the day when you need wisdom. You know, don't ask for his peace when you feel anxious. Don't confess your weaknesses when you feel tempted. Don't get on your knees and repent when you sin or when you defy God. I think he would say stuff like, whatever you do, don't cultivate the habit of looking up to a transcendent God who is with you every day. Just Get used to living within the boundaries of your own inadequacy and your own anxiety. Live as if you're on your own and everything depends on you. And see, that's the without God life. And the evil one will whisper to you, just get used to that. Just live every moment outside of God's presence. And here's what I think can happen. A person can experience God powerfully in one season of their life. They can know him, they can seek him, they can depend on him, they can love him and pursue him and encounter him deeply. But then life enters a new phase, right? It's a new season. Now, the person doesn't suddenly become an axe murderer. But slowly over time, what happens is that relationship with God, it just dissipates. Especially if things in life are pretty stable, pretty routine. A person can go to church and they can be engaged in Christian community. They can volunteer in ministry. They can go through spiritual motions. And yet deep down, what happens is this hunger for God that they once had is just gone. The life-giving connection that they once had with God is just evaporating. Now, if you ask the person to state their spiritual beliefs, they would say, well, of course I believe in God. Their core theology hasn't changed. Still believe that Jesus is the Son of God, still believe that he's crucified and resurrected, still believe that the Bible is God's word. But from an actual day-to-day perspective, there's just no awe of God. There's no day-to-day experience with him. There's no real adventure that they're experiencing in following him. Practically speaking, they have completely settled for life without God. And I'll tell you when I think we're in the greatest danger of this. It's when things are going well. When life is predictable, when we settle into a familiar and mostly enjoyable routine. When we're, for the most part, getting what it is that we want. In the Old Testament, you see this pattern with Israel over and over. You read the Old Testament, you're like, guys, come on. Really? It just keeps happening. But you see this pattern. They find themselves in crisis, right? And so they cry out to God, and then they humble themselves, and they plead with God to move among them and fix whatever the issue is. And they repent of their sins, and they consecrate themselves to him, and he forgives them, and he meets them, and he provides miracles, and he fixes the mess that they're in. And then there's this passionate worship, and you go, what a great story. But the moment fades, and pretty soon life goes back to normal. The crisis passes and life regresses to the familiar and the predictable. And God just sort of becomes an afterthought, an experience of the past. And they stop humbling themselves and they stop seeking him. And it's actually kind of staggering to see how easy it is, really, to just forget God. You have these seasons where he is so real. And you can see him, and you can see his activity in your life, and you're just in love with him. And more than anything else, you have those moments where it's more than anything else, God, I just want you, more of you. But then things change. And the next season of life comes along, and you don't sense him. And it isn't that he's hiding. It's that you really aren't looking. Your life subtly becomes about all kinds of other stuff, and you just sort of settle for life without God. And if we find ourselves in that place, we really have to decide, do I really want God? Or is it mostly that I just want a really nice life? If I get the nice life, how important is it to me to actually encounter and experience God? In Exodus 33, this ongoing story of the craziness, the ups and downs with Israel, God does this amazing thing. He forces Israel to come to a point where they have to decide what it is they actually want. And they're in the season where they have just experienced the power and the magnificence of God in mind-blowing ways, over and over and over. God has just delivered them from slavery in Egypt, where for 400 years they've been in bondage to the Egyptians, and they had cried out. And so they were, slaves under unimaginable conditions. But they cried out to God, and God has freed them in the most miraculous ways. They have witnessed his power. They've seen the plagues. They've seen the Red Sea part in front of them. They've walked through on dry ground, gone to the other side, and as the Egyptian army pursued them, God just swallowed up the army in the Red Sea. Unbelievable. God was physically present with them in a visible way. And his presence, we're told, was symbolized by this huge cloud in the sky, the pillar in the sky. And in the daytime, it was a cloud. At nighttime, so they could see it, it was fire. And they, of course, had this problem of food and water. There's 1 million of these recently freed slaves in the desert. Not enough food or water. So what does God do? He gives them manna, and he sends quail, and he gives them water from a rock. I mean, it's just like miracle after miracle to provide for them. And you look at that, you go, can you imagine what it must have been like to have experienced all of that? This was in a couple of weeks period of time. Crazy. But the reality is some seasons of life, they're kind of like that, right? Some seasons of life, you have this experience of God that is so powerful, and his presence is so tangible, and it's so real. But then you enter into a new season of life. And for Israel, what happened is all the miracles died down for a minute or two. And life got kind of quiet. And so Moses goes up on the mountain to meet with God. And he's up there, it turns out, way longer than expected. And that now there's no miracles, there's nothing, just waiting happening. And so the people get restless. And they do the only reasonable thing that they can think of. Right? They go around, they gather up all the gold that everybody has, and they melt it down, and they construct a golden calf statue, and then they bow down and start worshiping it. What else are you going to do, And as we know, after all that God had done, he was hurt by that. And he was deeply angered by it. So right after this whole incident in Exodus 32, the golden calf chapter, God makes an offer to Israel. And this is really a staggering offer. And it's funny because this doesn't get talked about that much, I don't think. Like, this doesn't get a lot of press, but this is amazing. This is Exodus chapter 33, verses 1-4. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses," okay, after the entire golden calf worshiping incidents, he says, "Leave this place, and you and the people you brought up out of Egypt, and go up to the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you, because you are a stiff-necked people." And the image there is like a horse, right? That they're trying to get it to go a certain direction, and it's just doing this against everything they're doing. It's like, you guys are like stiff-necked people. And I might destroy you on the way. God says, go ahead and go to the promised land. I'll send an angel to make sure you get there and you're safe. But I'm not going with you. And it says, when the people heard these distressing words, they began to mourn. Now think about what's happening here. God has made a pretty incredible offer to his people. Like, he's offering them pretty much everything that they've ever wanted. It's like he's saying to them, okay, here's the deal, guys. Even though you did this, still, you're going to be free from Egypt, and there's going to be no more slavery. And I will actually, because I promised to do this, I will send an angel with you to guide you, and you will have protection and guidance. I'll protect you from your enemies, and I will give you the homeland that I promised, the land that is flowing with milk and honey. Okay, this just incredibly fertile, fruitful land. And your lives will flow with material abundance. And you will get exactly what it is that you've always wanted. There's just one thing. I will not go with you. You will not have my presence. You can have everything that you've always wanted. Guidance so you can make the right decisions. Protection so you'll be secure. Success so that opposition will just melt in front of you. And abundance like as milk and honey flow. But you won't have me. You can have it all, except for me. So the Israelites have to weigh out what's really at stake here. And they put everything that they've always wanted on one side, and they put the presence of God on the other side. And they decide, actually, we just want to live in your presence, God. Like, all that other stuff is great. It's all great, but we don't want it without you. We cannot move on without you. We will not move on without you. And the whole nation, at hearing these words, goes into mourning. Okay, 1 million of them go into mourning. So Moses goes out to meet with God. This is picking this up in verse 7. It says, "Now Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people rose and stood at the entrances to their tents, watching Moses until he entered the tent." Can you imagine that? Like 1 million people? "As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. Whenever people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance of their own tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to camp." So Moses would meet with God regularly in what's called the tent of meeting. And it says in verse 7 that anyone inquiring of the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting outside the camp. Okay, so apparently it wasn't just Moses that would do this. But when Moses would go out to the tent, when he would go out and he would meet with God, the cloud, okay, this cloud that the whole nation could see, the cloud that represented to them the very presence of God, would descend on the entrance of the tent. And when the people would see the cloud descend, they would stand at the entrance of their own tents and they would worship God together. Now that is, I don't know about you, that is such a powerful image to me. Moses meeting with God and the nation just standing there at the front of their tents worshiping God together. So on this day, Moses goes out to the tent to have a little, heart-to-heart with God. And Moses pleads with God on behalf of the people. He just says, do not send us on without you. Okay, we cannot go on without you. We will not go on without you. And God agrees to continue to be present with them. But I want us to stop here and think for a moment about what happened. Because I think this is like huge. God had offered to them everything they had ever wanted, but they would have to go on without God's presence. They would have to go on without God. Now, you think about that. Like, what if God made that same offer to you? Like, what if he said to you, hey, what do you want? Like, I'm willing to give you whatever you ever wanted. Like, you want a nice house? You got it. Like, you want a nice car? Boom, you got it. You want that dream job? You bet. Okay? You want a rich uncle to leave you like this massive, obscenely large inheritance? Like, here you go. You want to be successful in everything that you're doing to unprecedented levels? Bam. Here's more success than anything you could have ever imagined. You want to be respected and admired and envied by the people around you? Like, no problem. Like, you're single? You want me to hook you up? Done. You're married? You want a healthy family of a certain size? No problem. You want your kids to be the smartest and the best looking and the most successful at everything they do? Here you go, like super kids. You want the weather in Seattle to be like Hawaii year round? Just done, like boom. Seattle is a tropical paradise, baby. I mean, what if God actually said, I'm willing to give you everything you ever wanted. Here's the only stipulation, okay? I'm not going to go with you. You will never experience my presence ever again. What if God said, I'll give you everything you want, but there will never again be times of prayer where you sense my presence with you. Every time you pray, it'll be like you're talking to a wall because you will be. I won't be listening. And you'll never have another time of worship where your heart explodes and your soul expands and you feel overcome with a sense of peace or joy or excitement. You'll never again be able to read the Bible or hear a sermon and get the sense that I'm talking directly to you. You won't feel me convicting you of sin. You won't feel me challenging you to live differently. You'll never again experience the healing that comes when you know deep down that you're forgiven. You'll never again be talking to a friend and sense that I'm talking to you through that person. Talking to you because I love you. And I won't partner with you or walk alongside of you anymore. You'll never again experience a divine moment where you know that you and I have done something incredible together. See, I'm willing to give you everything, but you won't have me. And here's my question for you. When is the last time you cried out to God and you said, God, I want to have times where I just know you. More than anything else in the world, God, I just want you. Sure there are blessings that I'm asking for. There's things in my life that I would really like to see you do for me. But more than any of that, I just want you. I just want more of you. When's the last time you cried out to God and said, God, I want to have times where I see your majesty so clearly that it gives me chills. Times where I get an overwhelming sense of peace and excitement because I know deep in my bones that you are good, that you are perfectly good, and you love me, and you are at work in my life and in the world in ways that are way beyond my understanding. I want to experience the excitement of knowing that you and I are working together to change the world, that my life matters in a deeper way. When's the last time that you said something like, God, I want to be able to come to you when I'm empty and have my heart filled to overflowing just because I'm with you? I want to have powerful times of prayer where not only do I talk to you, but I actually sense that you're talking back to me. I want to have times where I'm talking with a good friend, and although I'm talking to them, I clearly hear your voice in what they're saying to me. And I want to gather with other believers who are experiencing those same kinds of things, and together with one voice, lift you up and praise you because we all know together that we're not alone. More than anything else in the world, God, I just want you. I want to walk with you and see you and love you and be loved by you. And God, I will not be satisfied with just a nice life if you're not central to it. More than your blessings, God, I just want you. And maybe you've had seasons where God is so real and so tangible to you, where His presence has carried you. But if you're honest, you know you're not in that place right now. And maybe you're living a pretty nice life. But it's a nice life without God. And my question to you today is, if you're in that spot, how willing are you to just keep going? Because maybe you're here and maybe you're here and you've never really experienced God deeply. Maybe the whole idea of all of this is just completely foreign or brand new to you. But no matter where we are, what I find is staggering is this: God's greatest desire, no matter where we're coming from, is to be more present in our lives. His greatest wish is for us, no matter where we are, no matter how new or immature we are in our faith, is for us to take the next step, to seek Him and to find Him and to begin to experience and encounter Him. Right out of this episode with Israel, Moses asks God a ridiculous question. And God's response to it, I think, just reveals to us His heart. God has essentially just been cheated on by the nation of Israel. I mean, that's the imagery that's used in the Old Testament. God's talked about like he's jealous, like a jealous husband. And this whole golden calf thing, this was such a huge betrayal. So God has just been cheated on by the whole nation of Israel after he's blessed and provided for her, after all he's done. And so he's basically said, in this season right after being cheated on, he's basically said, look, okay, we'll just kind of divorce here, and I'll give you the house. And I'll pay for maid service and like lawn service for you so you don't have to do any work. And I will send you an obscenely large alimony check every month so you can have everything that it is that you want. And you can just live right here in my mansion. It's yours. You can have it. And you will never have to go without. And like there will be a cook for you, and you can drive the Escalade. You can have it all, but I'm moving out. I'm hurt, and I'm moving out. And Israel starts to think about this arrangement and says, whoa. No, God, hold on. We need you. Like we can't live without you. And the whole nation at the thought of this, I mean, realizing what it's done and the cost and all of this is going to happen, the nation just bursts into mourning. The people put on sackcloth and they throw ashes all over themselves and they begin weeping. Just weeping. And so Moses goes out to the tent, and with all of the people standing there with sackcloth and ashes and weeping and mourning, they all stand there looking on. And the cloud descends on the tent, and the whole nation begins to worship God. Hundreds of thousands of Israelites are standing there and they're singing together. The whole nation is in mourning, just weeping and singing and singing. And Moses is in the tent with God, and he just starts to plead with God. He just says to God, please don't go on. Please don't leave us. Please don't make us go on without you. We need you. God, we need you. And God says, okay, I will go on with you. I will be with you. Okay, you cheated on me. I mean, let's be clear. But I will stand by you anyway. And I will lead you, and I will protect you, and I will guide you, and you will be my people. And this is the answer he's looking for. And in the midst of all of this raw emotion, and I think this is kind of staggering, Moses, he ups the ante a little bit, and he goes on, he makes another request. He's like, oh yeah, well, and another thing. And check this out, verses 18 to 23. After he gets the answer he's looking for, it says, then Moses said, now, show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. In other words, you guys didn't deserve any grace here. But it's who I am. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. This can be too much for you. I'm overwhelming to you. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, because that's all you can handle right now. But my face may not be seen. And even after promises to continue to be present with Israel, like after Moses gets what he wants, Moses is just like, yeah, well, I want more. Like, how bold is that? Oh yeah, God, I want more. Like, I'm really glad you're going with us, but I want more. God, here's what I want. I want to see you in the fullness of all of your glory. Now show me your glory. And it's crazy to me, but God is like, right on. And he reveals as much of himself as Moses can handle in that moment. It's almost like God has just been waiting to be asked. God's like, really? Awesome. Like this is his greatest desire. It's almost like this is what we should expect if we cry out to him in all honesty. I mean, we make finding God like so complicated, don't we? Like, what if it's really just as simple as honestly crying out to him? Just sincerely asking him to reveal himself. It's interesting because, like, in our culture, we talk a lot about people finding God, right? This guy found God, and that guy found God, and everybody's looking for God, and we're trying to find God. The reality is, and I just think this is kind of ironic, God is not the one that's hiding. Like, we're the ones that hide, right? And the Bible paints the picture of this God who is always available and accessible to any who will humble themselves and come to him, any who will cry out to him. This scene reminds me of what God said through the prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 29, where God says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord." And so I just want to ask you to think about something today. What if God is longing to be present with you in ways that you have never dreamed? And what if it really is as simple as humbling yourself and honestly crying out to him, "God, show me your glory." Just sincerely saying, "God, I don't want to go on without you anymore. I need you in my life. I need your presence. I need your guidance. I need your love. I need your compassion. I need your grace. I need your strength. I need your courage. God, more than a nice life, I need you. So now, show me your glory." One of the ancient practices established by Jesus that helps us to engage in the presence of God is communion. And this morning, we're going to take communion as we worship together. We're going to spend, in just a couple minutes, we're going to spend about 20 minutes just worshiping God together. And at any point when you're ready, you can go to the table. Communion is a time to reflect on the love and the goodness of God. It's a time to confess sins, to ask forgiveness, to receive grace. It's a time to stop and think about our lives and the direction we're heading, and if it's really going the direction it ought to be going. And to think about the kindness of God. Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, starting with verse 23. He says, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So then whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and the blood of the Lord. Everyone ought to examine themselves before they eat of the bread and drink of the cup." Like, this is a very holy, very sacred thing that Christians have been doing together for 2,000 years. And Paul says we need to examine ourselves before we take communion. So in a few minutes, we're going to take some time to worship, and I just encourage you to take that time to examine yourself. To think about what it is that you're ultimately pursuing these days. Now I want to say, to take communion here, you don't need to be a member of this church. If you're visiting with us, you don't need to have completed a class or anything else. You just need to have put your faith in Jesus. You just need to be a follower of Jesus. And if you're here this morning and that's not you, and you're just checking this whole thing out, trying to figure this whole thing out, and you just aren't in a spot where you're ready to fully put your faith in Jesus, then I want you to know, man, we are so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. And it's my prayer that one day all of this clicks for you and it becomes very real for you. That one day you would encounter God in a way that is undeniable. And in the meantime, I hope you keep coming here, or you're going somewhere else and checking things out and looking into this. And I hope that if this is where you choose, that this is a safe place for you, inviting place. Because the reality is we're all thrilled that you're here. But communion is for those that follow Jesus. And so for those of you that are here that are followers of Jesus, as we head into our time of worship and communion, it might be that for some of you, it's been a while since you have really encountered God powerfully. And maybe deep in your core, when you think about it, you realize the thing you most need is simply for God to show you his glory. To again, get a clear vision of who God is and why that matters so much. I mean, maybe you're in a spot where if your life these days, you feel worry or you feel anxiety all the time. And what you really need is you need to see and feel and know deep in your bones that you are in God's grip, that he has got you. Or maybe you feel like totally inadequate and you constantly wrestle with this feeling of being incapable, and you just need to hear God say to you, okay, look, you're enough. You're more than enough. Like, I've given you everything you need to be exactly who I have called you to be. Or maybe you're in a spot where honestly, life is feeling kind of dry right now. There's a little boredom. And maybe you've been tempted to kind of spice it up in all kinds of ways. Maybe what you need is to meet God and to get some perspective, to let him engage you in something bigger than yourself, in his mission. To start investing yourself and sacrificing yourself for other people for the sake of stuff that matters, that will matter far beyond your time on this earth. Or maybe you're here this morning and honestly, you're filled with shame. Like, you're feeling unworthy to even be in church. And what you really need is to experience the healing grace of God. You need to encounter him and just let him wash over you. You need to hear him say to you, look, I know about all that, and I forgive you. So let's just start new. Like, I don't know what it is you've got going on these days. I don't know what you're wrestling with, but what heals us and what it is that actually makes us whole is the presence of God. There is absolutely nothing that can breathe life into us like his presence. And so I just want to encourage you, man, don't trade that to pursue anything else. Father in heaven, thank you for loving us. I thank you for your grace.